Hi! Start of a new book, The Twits, another one by Roald Dahl. So I thought I'd read the blurb on the back here. Some of you might know the story, but hey, I know the story and I always enjoy it when I come back to it. So give it a go. But if you're not sure, listen on. Mr. and Mrs. Twit are really disgusting. They smell because they never wash. They fight because they play tricks on each other, and they hate children. But worst of all, they keep monkeys in their back garden, in cages. It's time for the monkeys to get their revenge on these two most revolting creatures. I hope you're keeping up with your reading at home. I've put some guided reading activities on the blog, so go check them out, give them a go and keep those Vipers Code skills going whilst you're not at school. It's really important. Nothing better than reading. I'm really enjoying my reading at the moment. I love reading the books to you each day. I'm reading lots of books, I'm listening to lots of books, and really catching up on lots of reading. So I hope you're taking the time to do that too. I know a few of you are because I've been sent some emails. So don't forget to share your reading via a book review, which I'll put a link in the video down below. This video, put a link for you to download a book review template or make up your own. But let's find out about the Twits. Introducing Mr. Twit, Mrs. Twit, the roly-poly bird, the muggle-wump monkeys. Let's begin. Now I'm seeing this more and more often nowadays. Hairy faces. What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays. When a man grows hair all over his face, it's impossible to tell what he really looks like. Perhaps that's why he does it. He'd rather you didn't know. Then there's the problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big a job as when you and I wash the hair on our heads. So, what I want to know is this. How often do all those hairy-faced men wash their faces? Is it only once a week, like us, on Sunday nights? And do they shampoo it? Do they use a hairdryer? Do they rub hair tonic in it to stop their faces from going bald? Do they go to a barber to have their hairy faces cut and trimmed? Or do they do it themselves in front of the bathroom mirror with nail scissors? No, I don't know. But next time you see a man with a hairy face, which will probably be as soon as you step out onto the street, stay 2 meters away, unless they're living with you in the same family, maybe you will look at him more closely and start wondering about some of these things. A whole group of hairy-faced men. Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit was one of these very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, and his nose, was covered with thick hair. The stuff even sprouted in revolting tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes. Mr. Twit felt that this hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand, but in truth, he was neither of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted as it does on most hairy-faced men. It grew in spikes that stuck out straight like the bristles of a nail brush. And how often did Mr. Twit wash this bristly nail brushy face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sundays. He hadn't washed it for years. Dirty beards. As you know, an ordinary unhairy face like yours or mine simply gets a bit smudgy if it's not washed often enough. And there's nothing so awful about that. But a hairy face is a very different matter. Things cling to hairs, especially food. Things like gravy go right in among the hairs and stay there. You and I can wipe our faces smooth with a flannel and we quickly look more or less all right again. But the hairy man cannot do that. We can also, if we are careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces. But not so the hairy man. Watch carefully next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you will notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it is impossible for him to get a spoonful of beef stew or ice cream and chocolate sauce into it without leaving some of it on the hairs. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he ate. As a result, and because he never washed, there were always hundreds of bits of old breakfasts and lunches and suppers sticking to the hairs around his face. They weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe them off with the back of his hand or his sleeve whilst he was eating. But if you look closely, not that you'd ever want to, you would see tiny little specks of dried up scrambled eggs stuck to the hairs, and spinach and tomato soup and fish fingers and minced chicken livers and all the other disgusting things that Mr. Twit liked to eat. If you looked closer still, hold your noses, ladies and gentlemen, if you peered deep into the moustachy bristles sticking out over his upper lip, you'd probably see much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand, things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese or a mouldy old cornflake or even the slimy tail of a tin sardine. Because of all this, Mr. Twit never really went hungry. By sticking out his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the hairy jungle around his mouth, he was always able to find a tasty morsel here and there to nibble on. What I am trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was a foul and smelly old man. He was also an extremely horrid old man, as you will find out in a minute. But first, let's see some pictures. Let's find out about Mrs. Twit first. Mrs. Twit. Mrs. Twit was no better than her husband. She did not, of course, have a hairy face. It was a pity she didn't, because that, at any rate, would have hidden some of her fearful ugliness. Take a look at her. Have you ever seen a woman with an uglier face than that? I doubt it. But the funny thing is that Mrs. Twit wasn't born ugly. She had quite a nice face when she was young. The ugliness had grown upon her year by year as she got older. Why would that happen? I'll tell you why. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a double chin and sticky out teeth, but if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely. Nothing shone out of Mrs. Twits' face. In her right hand, she carried a walking stick. She used to tell people that this was because she had warts growing on the soles of her feet. And walking was painful. But the real reason she carried a stick was so she could hit things like dogs and cats and small children. And then there was the glass eye. Mrs. Twit had a glass eye that was always looking the other way. The next chapter is called The Glass Eye. Come back tomorrow and we'll find out all about Mrs. Twit and that glass eye.